I'm on a 6-month world cruise, actually a Crystal Serenity World Cruise. And this cruise really is a result of what I call having a dream in order to have a dream come true. And so my idea to be rich is something that I've created over the last 10, 20, 30, definitely 45 years of being in the construction industry. And with your permission, I'd like to share that with
Welcome back, everybody, to the Workergenix Mastermind podcast. Today, we have an amazing guest who is also a world traveler who's going to speak to us about a unique topic called Niche to be Rich. I'm excited to dive into this. Before we do, I want to share a little background about Ann McNeill. So Ann McNeill is a trailblazer, visionary, and highly sought after speaker with over 40 years of experience in the construction industry. As the founder and president of MCO Construction and Services Incorporated, she has built one of South Florida's most respected minority-owned construction firms, breaking barriers in a traditionally male-dominated field. Ann is also the founder of Constructively Speaking Incorporated, a platform that combines her expertise in construction with her passion for personal development and the National Association of Black Women in Construction, a groundbreaking organization dedicated to empowering Black women in the construction industry. Through these initiatives, Ann inspires individuals and organizations to build not only physical structures, but also purposeful and prosperous lives and businesses. A certified Napoleon Hill Foundation coach, Ann has dedicated her life to helping others unlock their potential through timeless success principles. She is also the founder of the International Mastermind Association, where she mentors professionals in achieving whole life success. Ann, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. How are you doing?
Listen, I am doing fine. Thank you so very much for asking. I usually like to say that if I were any better, I'd be you.
If you could just share kind of what you're doing right now on the cruise. You mentioned that at the beginning, and I think people would be interested to hear how you're living your life now with the cruise.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So let me just share that, I'm on a 6-month world cruise, actually a Crystal Serenity World Cruise. And this cruise really is a result of what I call having a dream in order to have a dream come true. And so my idea of niching to be rich is something that I've created over the last 10, 20, 30, definitely 45 years of being in the construction industry. And with your permission, I'd like to share that with your audience. Is that okay?
Yes, please elaborate.
All right. 9 p.m., December 31st, 1979. My husband and friends decided to go out and celebrate the new year. I decided to stay home and read a book. And that book was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And as I began to read the book began to read me. And I realized that night when the author asked me how much money did I want, I realized for the first time in my adult life, nobody had ever asked me that. So I'm home alone, and I decided to actually stop for a moment and began to walk through the exercises that he gave us in the book. So he first said, I made it personal. He said, Ann McNeill, how much money do you want? I said $1,000 in my mind. The second question he asked me was, what are you going to do in order to get the money? I said, save the money. Third question was, by what date do you want the money by? I said, December 31st, 1980, since this was 1979. But the fourth question he asked me, where is your plan of action? I did not have a plan. And so from that day to this day, my journey has been focusing on those 4 questions, but he actually gave me 6 steps. And I'll share with your audience, the other 2 steps, but those 4 questions has driven me. I've created 5 businesses from that one page of that book, Think and Grow Rich. And that is what leads me to developing a process, a framework, if you will, that I call Niche to be Rich, focusing on the different areas of our business and our life. And that's what drives me to be on this ship for 6 months, because it was one of the goals, the dreams, if you will, that I had of how I wanted to invest my life, if you will, in the latter part of my life.
I love it. You are living the dream. You are a perfect example of the power of implementing the principles of Napoleon Hill's book. I'm a big fan of his writing, so I'm excited to kind of dive in a little bit more and hear, how you fleshed out these questions and were able to come up with these answers. Because I know a lot of people might struggle even with just those first few questions of, how much do you want and when do you want it by?
Thank you for the question. Let me go back to that night, 1979, and I remember it. I literally wrote it down, December 31st, 1979, 9 p.m. because as I began to make the decision, not make begin, I made the decision to get off the treadmill that night. You see, I realized I was climbing the ladder of success in the corporate world, but that night I realized my ladder was leaning against the wrong wall for me. And I had to come down off the ladder because when I went through the process of determining how was I going to make an extra $1,000 and or save an extra $1,000, I could not. And so I decided that night to pull out 11 months of canceled checks. And this is my process. And I decided to write the checks, in order. January, how much was I spending and where was I spending it? I got a negative. February, a negative. March, a negative. All the way through November, a negative. And as I began to do that, I realized really for the first time in my adult life, I mean, but you don't know how bad. I knew I was in debt, but I didn't know how bad it was, how deeply in debt I was, because I had properties that my husband and I had bought, and we were renting out the properties to people who weren't paying their rent, but we had to pay the mortgages.
Right.
And then you can only do that for so long. And so that's what caused me to be in such debt. But that night changed everything for me because I sat there and I decided that I was going to do something different that night. And the something different was to write a plan like he asked me to do. And I kept trying to figure it out and I could not come up with a plan. Now it's 4:00 in the morning. My husband and friends are coming in from celebrating the new year. I'm sitting there. Now I'm crying. And I'm crying because I'm hopeless, because I cannot figure out a plan. And of course, for those men that are listening, ladies, my husband thought I was crying over him. And ladies, I let him, of course. But the next morning, I got up and I continued to read the book. Now, let me fast forward 30 years in the future. Within the first 10 years, I got out of the debt, yes. But in the first year, I created my first mastermind group in 1980. Because as I continued to read his book, he made a suggestion in the mastermind chapter and principle. He said, listen, find like-minded, like-spirited individuals, form a mastermind group, hold each other accountable on your goals, meet regularly, which was 2 times or more a week. And he gave us a process. So from that day to this day, I have 3 books on that process. One is called, I actually have it here. One is called How to Start and Run a Successful Mastermind Group, the McNeill Factor. But it wasn't enough. We had to prove how it works. So we met every Saturday at 7 a.m., 10 of us. And we did that consecutively for over 10 years. Actually, now we're over 30 years. And we've created hundreds of mastermind groups. We've created the International Mastermind Association, which creates best practices. And we hold an annual meeting every year. But going back to your question about how do you do it, you form a mastermind group of accountability. And what happens oftentimes, we don't really understand, who do you put in your mastermind group? Just one person. This is, they're paid mastermind and then there's free. But this is where the niche to be rich comes. So on my journey, I realized that I could not, with my corporate job only, an entrepreneur, right, inside of an organization, still with a job, I could not make extra money unless I picked up an extra skill. And that is how I ended up realizing that construction was an option. And I went to a trade school while working on a master's degree and while working my corporate job and volunteering to help contractors. Yes. And this is where the niche to be rich comes in. Yes.
All right. Well, I'm excited to hear about this. So tell me more about Niche to be Rich. How did this come about?
Well, Niche to be Rich came about because as I formed my construction company, yes, I own it 100%. I did not have a license. I was using somebody else's license because I went to trade school. I got a good corporate job. And then I picked up small jobs with contractors. And I read the story of Barnes, who said, he hopped that train and went to work with Edison because he knew he wanted to be in business with Edison. So I decided to go and identify the largest Black contractor in the United States and see if I could work for them while working my corporate job part-time.
And where was this?
And well, I lived in West Palm. This was in Miami. After the riots happened in Miami, was torn. a company by the name of MCO Construction, which at the time, according to Black Enterprise, was the largest Black contractor in the United States, between him and a company called Russell Construction, both out of Atlanta. When Miami was torn, Thacker Construction came to help with the rebuilding. I was focused on the Barnes story and Think and Grow Rich. And I said, if I believe that I can do this, which I did believe that I could do it, I would be willing to work in construction to learn it from the very best. That's what Barnes did. So I approached the president of the company, Floyd Thacker, and I told him I would like to come to work with him. I took a 50% cut in my salary. With the support of my husband.
A big sacrifice.
Yes, but no, a big investment.
Yes.
See, languaging is everything. It was a big investment for me to make, only because I'd read the book over and over and over and over again. I began to practice the principles, and this is what it looked like. I figured if Barnes could take 5 years and sweep the floor for Edison to eventually become his partner, I could take 5 years and work for this Black contractor, managing everything he did for the state. I knew business because I have an undergraduate degree in accounting and master's in finance, but I did not know construction. So I went to a trade school while I was doing all of this. And then I began to study to show myself approved. I began to study the construction exam so I could pass the exam to have my own license. But I did not let that stop me. So the first niche to be rich area, McNeill factor that I call, is your craft. If you're a professional, are you an expert in your craft? If you own a business, are you an expert in your business skill? And do people know you as an expert? It's not about who you know, it's who knows you, going back to key personal influence. So the first niche is niche your craft, your skill, your profession. The second niche to be rich that I learned over the years and began to practice is I had to learn the business of the operations of my business. And I used to tell people, it was not a joke, my favorite partners in my business was the IRS and workers' comp and my rent and my salary for my employees. At one point, my salary was $80,000 a week. These were my partners in business. The operations of your business is a business by itself.
It is.
So
and if
that's
people
the
don't treat it that
second-
way, they're just having a small job effectively, right?
Well, they're out of business is what they are.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you got to wait for yourself to pay yourself. Yes, you're out of business. And so you may as well go get a job and then do your business as an entrepreneur until you can become an entrepreneur. So that's the second business that we're all in, the business of the operations of the business. And all operational businesses are not the same. I have 5 businesses. So the operations of my not-for-profit is not the same as the operations of my profit. The operations of the International Mastermind Association is not the same as the operations of my constructive speaking business, of my MCO construction business, of my consulting business. They all have their different nuances. So that's the second business that we're in. But the third business that we're in is the business, and you must niche here, is the business of the industry that you're in. Let's take a pause there. Why? Because oftentimes we don't take our craft and say, which industry will give me and yield me the highest return off the investment of my craft. I'll give an example. I just hosted, on behalf of the National Association of Black Women in Construction, a $1 billion luncheon last week. So depending upon when your guests listen to this, as the founder of the National Association of Black Women in Construction, I created, blessed by God, to create an idea from the book Think and Grow Rich Again, where for those of us that read the book, we read the book where Carnegie hired Schwab to manage the operations of his steel business. Schwab had an idea, and the idea was called a $1 billion dinner speech, where he got all of the financiers together, and you're shaking your head like maybe you remember the story, and they created what we now know as U.S. Steel. Well, I read that for years. And because I'm a journaler, I wrote another book called My Daily Date with Myself. And years ago, I'm having a date with myself early in the morning. I'm a 4 o'clock riser. And I'm reading the story again. I said, oh my gosh, if Charles Schwab can have a $1 billion dinner speech utilizing these principles, how much doing what by when, and where's your plan, I can do the same thing. Why don't I identify in my industry of construction billionaires, billion-dollar organizations, and have them become my clients? I'm a very small business, let's be clear. But just because I am small does not mean I have to think small, right? So I
Right.
started inviting agencies that had billion-dollar budgets to lunch. And then I started inviting them to lunch with my friends. And it grew and grew and grew until I started inviting them to lunch at a luncheon with over 100 people at a restaurant. And then when COVID hit, I'd been on Zoom for 5 years as a part of the National Speakers Association. I'm a board member of NSA, and we'd been on Zoom for 5 years before COVID. So when COVID hit, I didn't skip a beat, and I created the billion-dollar luncheon by industry on Zoom the same month COVID hit. I just moved
Wow.
it from in person onto the platform. The next niche to be rich is the industry. So I host a billion-dollar lunch per industry for aviation, transportation, healthcare, water utilities, transit. So all of these industries that relate to construction. And I invite the billion-dollar agencies, like, for example, transportation. We've had Pete Buttigieg 3 times, twice in person, twice on Zoom and once in person.
Wow.
And they bring their billions of dollars of opportunities for that industry. And what it does for our businesses, for those that is listening to understand how does it relate to you, I invite my clients to lunch with me with their clients. Can I say that again?
Say it again.
Virtually on Zoom, I invite my clients who are contractors and engineering firms. I invite them to lunch with me on Zoom as the founder of the National Association for Black Women in Construction. And I invite their clients, my client's client, to present the billions of dollars in their master plan, in their CIP program. Now that connects me with my client because I'm adding better value to my clients because I'm bringing them their clients in the billions,
Right.
not the millions. I don't do the DEI. I don't do the MBE, DBE. I don't do all, I'm already all of those things. My clients are not interested in that. Clients are
Yeah.
interested in the green bottom line. And so that's the third industry. You must niche in that craft, in that industry, in the business, and do one thing at a time, one industry, own that industry, whether it's water, transportation, healthcare, whatever it is. Now, the fourth niche to be rich area is niching in your relationships. And I ask my clients, my coaching clients, I say, what's the last book you've read on relationships? I love Jeffrey Gitomer's books. You know, the little green book, the little black book, the little yellow book of selling, all of these things. Why? Because he helps you to build relationships with your clients. And I would say that in my own experience, the relationships that I've built and I'm still building has been the major reason why I have greater success. I don't have any competition except myself. Why? Because if I'm being the very best I can be for my clients in relationship building and adding value to them, I don't concern myself with competition. So you niche in your craft, niche in your operations, niche in your industry, niche in your relationships of the industry and the associations in that industry. Own that association in that industry. And the fifth one is niching in the area of money. Why do I say that? See, oftentimes we're so focused on making money. Seldom do we stop to learn how to make the money make money.
Say it
Are
again.
you maxing out your Roth IRA? Are you maxing out your 401k? Are you maxing out every legal opportunity that the government gives you, like your SEP IRA? Do you have a
Yeah.
short-term saving? Do you have a long-term saving? Do you have emergency savings? I do what I call a niche to be rich retreat. And I go through a litany of these questions with my clients. Why? Because seldom do we stop and realize the benefit and value of a $20 bill. You see, one of the benefits I have for starting a business while I was broke is that I did not have any money and I did not have any savings. So I had to learn the hard way how to climb out of debt by reading. You see, the other area of this whole process, I like what Charlie Tremendous Jones says, that we will be the same in 5 years except for two things: the books we read and the people we meet. the books we read, and the people we meet. And so when you think about the books you read, I read a lot of books in 10 different areas of my life: spiritual, family, financial, education, health, personal development, business and career, recreation, creativity, and civic. We set goals in these areas. So when I began to read in the area of finance, books like Nine Steps by Susie Orman, David Bach, all of the books he's written, I'd read. All of the books Susie Orman wrote, I read. Why? Because I had to learn the benefit and value of the compounding interest of a $20 bill and investing that in my short-term savings, $20, long-term savings, $20 into my 401k. Yes, only $20 per month. $20 into my Roth IRA. Yes, only $20 a month. But use the power of compound interest of that money over 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. That's why I'm sitting on this ship for 6 months.
Right. This is excellent. I think this resonates a lot, especially just like the last few episodes that we've published are right in line with what you're talking about here. So this is a great, just kind of a capstone to all these topics of just summarizing all the things that we've been talking about on this podcast and putting it into action and seeing the results. You're living the results of all these principles. It's clear if people just follow these things and you put the work in, you can have this kind of life. It's amazing.
You said the word, you've got to do the work though. And oftentimes we think the work is outside of us, but it's the inner work we must do. I talked about the $1,000 a year. It took me 10 years to do that. My desire now is to generate $1,000 a day passive. That changes the entire mindset of the conversation. So it took me 10 years to save $1,000 a year.
Wow.
But from that day to this day, my new goal is to save $1,000 a day passive.
Awesome. I love it. And if you've shared a lot of great details and ideas with your different niches here for people to have their goals and how they can achieve it by niching down in these different areas of life and business and personal development. If people want to learn more and have a deeper conversation with you and get more information about this, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I would say you could text the number 59925. That number again is 59925. And in the chat, just put the word and I will send you what I started mentioning about the 6 areas to niche to be rich. But I'd also like to suggest get a copy of my book. I am really focusing on how to start and run a successful mastermind group. My goal this year is to create 100 mastermind groups. And again, there are paid masterminds and there are free masterminds. And my friend Les Brown tells me all the time, Ann, people don't respect what they get for free. And the more they pay, the more they pay attention. But I do believe that there are family masterminds and some free masterminds that we can do to have a better quality of life in every area of our lives. And so I'm focusing on helping individuals start mastermind groups utilizing my process, which we've had over, like I said, over 1,000 people to come down this journey. And it's been very successful. Many of them are National Speakers Association, which I coach, $1 million mastermind. I do it twice a year, and I've had over 1,000 people to come through that. So that's a good way to reach out to me is 59925. And in the chat, just put the word Ann. And of course, you can go to my website at annmcneill.com. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ann, for sharing this amazing information, for all the help you're doing, putting back out the information and knowledge that you've learned over the years to help other people be successful as well. It's amazing service you're doing.